Hello there, I'm here with Patrick J. Don Vito. He is the editor of The Green Book. It's in theaters now, which won a Golden Globe, and he's a nominee for Best Editor for the 2019 Oscars. Alright, so you start the movie, The Green Book. It starts two characters, Tony Valladega and Donald Shirley, the doctor, starred by Viggo Mortensen and Mahershala Ali. I really like in the movie about the parts where it kind of has like this funny aspect and then it has like a really real aspect. I like how there's parts in like the rain scene where Donald Shirley he gets out of the car and he's like, I'm not white enough, I'm not black enough, then what am I? I felt like that was a very powerful message. And then there were funny times where like where they go to the plantation house and they're all eating the fried chicken that they bring out. I thought that was really funny. If you have anything you want to say about working on the movie, about like that aspect of it, kind of like the seriousness and then like the balancing of it.
That was probably the most difficult thing about the movie, is the balance of the comedy and the drama, because it's hard to get that exactly right. You really have to, the laughs have to come out of the scene and the characters rather than just out of the blue. Like you'll see like a broader comedy and there'll be jokes. Yeah, they make you laugh, but are they part of the story? Not really. All the laughs have to come from the characters in the story. So that was a very careful. We did that very carefully. You know, there were times on the set they would ad-lib and add jokes and add things, and so we had to go through and decide what to use and what not to use. And sometimes you'd look at it and go, that seems like they're trying to tell a joke, and so that's out. And so really it was about balancing the drama and the comedy, and you know, at what points do you have the laughs?
And then, so I saw the movie, and then I wanted to talk about a little bit on. There was a scene that was cut out. You had mentioned this, I think, in an interview that I watched. JFK was supposed to be in the movie.
Yeah, there was a scene in the car, and we had mentioned what it was actually it was kind of a laugh too. We had mentioned that he knew JFK, and Tony didn't believe him. He goes, "Oh, now who's the bullshit artist?" And so they had a whole laugh back and forth. And so the reason that was cut out is the scene was going on a little too long. We thought maybe we should get out of the scene. But also there was a scene later in the jail where you find out he gets a phone call, and it was Bobby Kennedy that called and got him out. So if we gave away the JFK, it might not be as surprising when you find out the Bobby Kennedy connection.
Yeah, I saw that part, and I was a little confused after the movie ended. I was like, who called? Because the cops were like all scared of who was on the phone, and like when they busted him out.
Yeah, Bobby Kennedy called the governor, and that was a true story. That was really happened.
That's crazy how he just one phone call.
One phone call and he got out of jail.
Another thing I wanted to ask was, this movie kind of has like a love story almost because of the letters. Obviously, that's how basically everything was kind of tracked, right? Through some of the love letters, and then it's kind of like Donald Shirley kind of teaching Tony Valladega how to love, basically.
Yeah, kind of like a Cyrano de Bergerac, you know.
I thought that was very clever.
Yeah, that character, the wife character, even though she seems kind of incidental, she's not involved directly with the story, she's so important for the heart of the story, because we come back to her and we have these scenes that really, of love, that really make you feel like they have this strong connection as husband and wife. And it helps anchor the movie, having those scenes.
So you have worked on, you have all the list here, thousands and thousands of TVs, movies, pilots, and everything. Through these, you've met several celebrities. Let's name some, like Mike Myers, Mark Lawrence. You met Seth MacFarlane through movie 43. You met Peter Farrelly through movie 43. That's how you were able to start this movie.
Yeah.
What was it working with like Peter and like getting to know and getting to meet all these people? I'm sure like the first time it was kind of just like start.
It's interesting. The person I had the closest relationship with was Mike Myers, because Mike, you know, being in editing, you don't go to a set a lot. You're in the room by yourself, and you see the celebrities usually when you're doing ADR, what's called looping, when you're re-recording lines that were not recorded well or weren't recorded at all. And so with Austin Powers, Mike was in the cutting room every day. So I would have lunch with him. We'd tell stories.
Do you ever go out?
I would try to make him laugh. Yeah, we'd hang out and have lunch together, that sort of thing. And so it was it was always a challenge to try to make Mike laugh because
he's the funny guy.
He's the funny guy. You can't, and so if you could make Mike laugh, that was like you were golden. And so I did it on a cut once where I recut the sequence, and I moved a line of his that he loved, and so when he was watching it, the line was missing, and he was like getting nervous. What happened to the line? And I said, hold on, keep watching. And then I used the line as a punch out for the scene, as an end of the scene, and he goes, and he starts laughing. He goes, that was brilliant. So I was so happy I got to make Mike laugh.
Does he ever make any of his like impersonations like in the public at all? Like he would do
he does weird stuff. Yeah, he does all sorts of weird stuff.
I grew up watching him, so it's like big for me that you were able to work with him.
Yeah, it was odd. Even the first time I met him, my old boss was Debbie Neal Fisher, and she'd started the movie, and I was coming back from vacation. I just started it, and I come walking down the hallway, and there's Mike walking towards me, and I go, hey, how's it going? He goes, hey, and he turns to go into the editing room. I was going to go in the room next door. He lifts up his shirt and he takes whipped cream and puts whipped cream on both his nipples, and he walks in, and I went, all right, I guess that's how we're doing the show.
That's what it's like working with Mike Myers.
That's what it's like working with Mike Myers. You never know what's going to happen.
You also worked on the movie Semi-Pro. Is there any connection with like Will Ferrell at all? Like,
yeah, Will was great. I mean, I actually have a signed basketball from
really?
him, from that league, which is really cool.
That's crazy.
It's really cool, but he is so funny, and I didn't get to, I met him a couple times, but he was at the time so in demand and so kind of
he was everywhere probably at the time.
Yeah, so it was really hard to get a chance to really talk to him.
Before or after Step Brothers? I think that was before. Huh, that's probably when he got started.
I can't remember. It may have been after. I can't remember time-wise.
Okay. So you had mentioned that in the Green Book, you really liked having the characters of Tony and Donald when they were together in a scene, and like you like the beauty of being able to balance, just like
their interplay. Their interplay was really great to watch, and so I always tried to keep on, even in the car, I tried to keep on that front angle where you can see them both at the same time, and let it just roll because you didn't need to cut.
You think those characters were too like seamlessly like perfect for this movie?
They amazing job. They did such an amazing job, and you would never know Vigo is not Italian. He did such a good job of it. And Mahershala added so much to it as well. I mean, he added a line that's a great line in the movie that wasn't in there beforehand.
How long did it take you to produce this movie?
We started right after Thanksgiving of 2017, and we were done by July of the next year. So, but it came together really fast. We after the shoot, the director gets 10 weeks, a director's cut, so they get to recut without showing it to anybody for 10 weeks. But Pete's very inclusive, so he was showing it to people all the time. We had a screening halfway into the director's cut for about 50 people to get ideas of like maybe where we were a little long, what things were working, what things weren't working, and so we finished very quickly. So we actually moved the date up. We actually had to take more time because of the visual effects. There's over 400 visual effects in the movie, which you probably wouldn't realize by watching it.
Man. That doesn't really. I mean,
yeah.
I'd ask you, but that's for a later time.
Well, I can tell you briefly what they are. Basically, Mahershala playing piano. It's not Mahershala.
Really? Okay, so that's when he was killing it on the piano.
That's Chris Bowers, our composer. He is actually playing. Mahershala took piano lessons.
He put the face on.
Basically, yeah.
Oh God.
So he took piano lessons just to get in the right. So he had the right looks and the right, posture. Yeah. So he studied all that and knew how to get in the zone. And then we'd shoot both of them playing, and then we basically replaced the head, put Mahershala's head, and then their skin tone is a little different too, so we had to actually change, Chris Bauer's skin tone is a little bit lighter, so we had to darken his hands so it matched Mahershala's skin tone.
Crazy these days.
But then there's also other stuff too, like you've got, you're doing a movie in the 60s, and you're driving down the street, and there's modern stuff as you're driving, whether it be cameras on buildings, so you have to erase all that stuff. Modern cars, erase it. So you have to go through every shot and do that. And
so there were cars like driving by in the scene, you just got rid of them.
Right. Or you're on the street and in the background on the street. I was always
so curious about how that worked. Like, how do you
sometimes you can clear it, sometimes you can't. So if you can't clear it, you got to just get rid of it later. We can do that now. When I was first in the business, it was a lot harder to do that. Dang. We didn't have digital
technology
effects.
Has really helped you out, huh?
Yeah.
So editing all these films, which one do you think is your favorite? I know your Green Book is probably like your big answer because it's probably one.
Considering I got an Academy Award nomination, I think Green Book. I'd have to say Green Book. But if I was talking about like just I'd say the Austin Powers films were so much fun just because of that close proximity to Mike and having that interaction every day. That was really fun. I loved working, but I've been able to work with a lot of great directors. Donald Petrie I worked with a few times, and I love working with him. And you know, it's Jay Roach is great with the Austin Powers films.
How many years did you work for the Austin Powers?
I worked on the first 2 Austin Powers, and I did some music videos for the 3rd one. I didn't actually work on the actual film. I was doing something else at the time, and then I came in and I cut some music videos for them. But the first 2 we worked on, the first one we came in after the director's cut. There was an editor already on it, and the director wasn't happy with his work, so he hired Debbie Neal Fisher, and she hired me, and we went on to it to help fix the movie.
Gotcha. So. All right. So we talked a little bit about movies and kind of like what you've been able to do. So let's talk about kind of your career.
Mm-hmm.
So what got you into film editing? Like, how'd you start? What was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
I went to Chapman, and part of that is probably my brother also went to Chapman, and he studied film, and so when I was in high school, I was getting to like help him on projects, and I went, oh, this is really cool. I can get a job doing this. This is great. So I went to Chapman, and then I was able to study all the aspects. Chapman was really small at the time, so you could really do anything you wanted to. So I tried directing, I tried sound, I tried all the jobs, and I just kind of gravitated towards editing. And when I was in my senior year, I got an internship on a TV show called Trials of Rosie O'Neill. And they were like one of the last shows they were still cutting on film, on upright moviolas. That was 90, I graduated in 91, so the internship was 90, in 1990.
Man, I wasn't even born yet.
So yeah, there you go. So 91, this internship that I had the year before, the post supervisor calls me and says, our runner got a job as an assistant, we need a runner, do you want to do it? And I'm like, yeah, I want to stop renting tuxes. And so that's how I started. And I was basically a runner where I'd go in and they'd say, we need you to go here, pick this up, deliver it here. Boom, boom, that's all I did is drive around, come back. And then as I was back and there was nothing to do, I would talk to the editors and the assistant editors, and I would learn from them kind of how they do their job. Okay. So a lot of...
All right. So for people who are trying to get into film editing, what would you have to say for them?
One is don't give up. I mean, like, if it's something you really want to do, you have to be tenacious. You have to keep trying. But as far as getting into it, I would say try to get a job as a runner and for post-production on a show. So you can be there, you can learn from them. That's really the best way. I've worked on some shows where we've actually gotten our runners into the union. So they've been with us, and it was actually on Up Close and Personal. We had a runner that really wanted to be an assistant editor, and so we needed an apprentice, we needed more help. And we asked the union, hey, we could hire from a list, but we have this guy here already, and he knows the show really well, and he would be a better fit because he already knows the show to step up. And they agreed to do it, and basically they said you have to pay him as an apprentice, for apprentice editor for 10 weeks, and then at the end of the 10 weeks, he can pay his dues and he can join the union, and then he can work on union shows. Mm. So that's kind of how he got in.
Interesting, interesting. Okay. For a person in your career, what salary would a person be looking at? Not your salary, but just like an estimate.
For an editing salary. Yeah. If you're on a union movie, I think the scale, like the minimum for editing on a union movie is around $2,600 a week.
Okay.
And that's scale, and that's for 45 hours, I think. So anything above that is overtime.
We talked about salaries. What are the entry-level positions that you would recommend people to go after? You said runners, but...
Runner, yeah. And then there is an apprentice editor job.
How would somebody find it? Like, how would somebody go and, like, would they be on the internet? Is there, like, a website?
There are some places you can go. I would say if you want to work on union films, you have to be in the union. So one of the ways you can get in the union is you work on non-union films for, I believe it's 100 days. And you save your paycheck stubs that say assistant editor. And after 100 days, you can then go to the union and you can join the union, and then you can work on union films. So I did that. My first film I worked on was Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. And so that was a non-union film, super low budge. And so I worked in that, and I worked in another TV movie that was non-union, and I got my hours, and I could then, literally next door, they were working this movie, they needed another assistant, and I was like able to go right to the union, pay my dues, join the union, and work on that show.
Yeah. So you really gotta save everything. Like you have to keep your records because they probably don't, they're very like cutthroat over there, huh?
It's hard. You know, it's hard to get in now too because they, you know, as the jobs get smaller. Like when I started, there were more people in editorial because you had film and digital. So like when you worked in a film, you still had to print film and you had to print because it would go to the Avid or whatever system you were working on. But then you'd conform on film for screenings because you still at that time we didn't have the technology to project HD, so it was all just film. We'd shoot, you know, basically it was cut by numbers, right? So I worked on the film side for a while, and they would edit on the Avid. The Avid would spit out a list, and then we'd put it down and we'd cut by the numbers. It's so kind of it sounds like medieval.
It does really.
We had this film coder, right? So what this thing would do is we would take the film, every roll, and we'd set a number. Like say the scene was 76, it would be 076 1000. The next roll 2000 for that scene, and you put it in this machine, and it would print that number across the edge of the film. The Avid had that number, and that's the number you'd use to cut the film. So basically, you're cutting by numbers. You know, it's a huge process that now is gone.
You're probably so glad that is not happening here anymore.
Oh, you should talk about. I should talk about film changing because when you had, say you had a version of the film and you sent it to the sound people, and they worked on it and they're done. Now you change it. Well, now what you do is in the Avid you can put one here and one in this tool, put one reel here, one reel here, and it prints out a list of where all the changes are. When we used to have to do it, you would have to basically, before you made the changes, send the work print, the actual film, out to be color duped. They'd make a duplicate of it, so you'd save that. And then they'd change the film, and then you'd put them side by side and reel through them, and you'd cut by cut write down the changes and figure out how many frames what changed.
Oh my goodness.
And it would take you hours sometimes to get through one reel. Now it's like, boop, hit a button.
It's all done, ready. 5
seconds. Yeah, it's crazy. Technology has changed a lot. Changed the business a lot.
So we're just about a month from the nominations when they make them. February 24th, I believe.
24th is when the actual ceremony is, yep.
How do you feel about that?
It's exciting. It's exciting. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully, it's my first time I've ever been to the Academy Awards, so that's going to be exciting. And hopefully,
a lot of people, a lot of celebrities, a lot of famous names.
Yeah, it's actually fun. I get to go a couple weeks before that. They're having a luncheon for all the nominees, so everyone that's been nominated, actors, editors, everybody gets to go to this luncheon, and you eat lunch and you talk to each other. You take a group photo.
That's gonna be
so that's pretty cool.
Mind blowing.
It's pretty crazy. I already feel like it doesn't quite seem real.
How close are you with Peter Farrelly?
We talk. It's basically a working relationship, but we're friendly outside. Have a cigar now and again.
All right. When you guys are editing, say for the Green Book, do you guys have like a specific place that you go? You said you guys were in New Orleans. Did you guys just stay in New Orleans when you would edit the film, when you were out there shooting? Yeah, we basically were editing in the production offices, so they just gave us an extra room, and it was actually Pete's office because he wasn't there a lot. He was out in the set. So we would cut in there, and then, yeah, it just depends on the show. So sometimes they want you to go on location, sometimes they don't care. The movie that I did that isn't out yet, Three Christs, they shot in New York, but I cut here. So they didn't care about me being close. Yeah. But on this movie, Pete wanted me close because he wanted to be able to come in and look at cuts and make sure he had everything he needed so he could, if he needed something else, he could shoot it. That's really what we kind of try to do is keep up to camera on the cutting and then suggest things. Hey, it'd be great if you had a shot of this. Or, hey, I think we're missing this. And so having that close proximity helps you do that. Is that like the same for every movie you've shot? Like they kind of had their own like studio where you kind of would go and edit? Usually, yeah. Usually it's basically you set up wherever
they'll let you set up. So sometimes if you're working for a studio, they want you on the lot of the studio. Like I've worked over at Fox, I've worked at Paramount, I worked at Disney. But sometimes they don't care where you are, and so you can pick an office that maybe is closer to home, which is always more preferable if you can do it, because then you can, shorter ride home.
So you're a big comedy guy. You do a lot of comedy movies.
A lot of comedies, yeah.
Movie 43, big comedy movie.
Yeah. Some people would probably differ with you on that. Some of the critics. But I thought it was great. I thought it was good. It's filthy, but it's great.
And then also the Green Book is obviously half a comedy,
yes.
also a serious movie. What was it like working on something that had so much weight with it? Like this has to be made perfectly, or else it could be taken totally wrong way.
I loved it. I loved working on the drama. I mean, for me, it's like comedy. For me, comedy is much more difficult because comedy, like what I think is funny, what you think is funny, may not be the same thing. And so what you're dealing with is you get the movie in shape, and then you get to a screening, and you find out where the laughs are, but sometimes you go like, oh, that didn't get as big a laugh as I thought. And you have to decide, is that going to survive, or will you have to pull that out? So you've got, drama, you look at things like the reality series, and they create these dramatic moments on these reality series that are completely created. So you can create, I feel like you can create drama easier than you can create comedy, because comedy is really tough.
Yes.
It's really tough. And but there are some great things you can do to fix scenes that are comedic. Even in this movie, in Green Book, there was a scene that where Dolores is reading the letter to her relatives, and they're playing poker behind, right? And the scene ends with when the relative says, "Why don't you write me a letter?" "Yeah, as soon as you make a meal." That was a funny joke.
Yes.
But that joke used to be in the middle of the scene. So the scene used to be, she reads the entire letter, that joke happens, then we go back to the poker playing, and the guys continue, and they have the line about Michelangelo and the 16th chapel is what he says, and then there was another joke, and that joke wasn't as good. So what I did is I took them playing poker, and I had her start reading the letter, cut to them playing poker, and had her keep reading the letter over that, and then had her finish it, and that way it moved the joke to the end. So in that way, it restructured the scene and punched it out with a much funnier joke.
I thought that scene was great when I watched it.
It's one of my favorites. Yeah.
Let's see. What is the biggest lesson that you've learned being a film editor?
Wow. Just perseverance, I think. I think that, the job is, there's two things. Perseverance, because you have to keep going. If you want to make this a career, it's not easy. And so you have to just keep trying. And there's no time limit. I mean, people get antsy and say, oh, it should be happening right now. It's like, everyone has a different time structure of how things happen to them. So keep working, because if you keep working hard, you'll eventually get there. And I'd say learn, you have to learn storytelling, and that's very important, but you also have to learn politics and social stuff, because you have to deal with producers and directors and studios, and maybe in some contentious situations where one doesn't agree with the other about the movie, and you have to be kind of the go-between for those people. So that is really important thing to learn along the way, is kind of feel out how, when you're working with an editor and there's problems, see how they deal with those problems and learn from that.
It's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
A lot to focus on, a lot to remember, I imagine.
Yeah.
Internships. Do you I don't know if you do your own have your own apprentices or anything, or people that you work with and try to make them better at film editing. Do you have anything like that?
I've tried in the past. Every once in a while we have an internship. It's funny now too. When I tried to have one on the show, an unpaid internship, but the studio wouldn't let me do it because they feel it's a liability. If somebody gets hurt while they're working for free for you, then they feel like there's a whole legal problem with that. So they want to be basically they have to agree to pay something to the person, and because and then to get them to agree to pay something to someone is a whole other thing.
That's hard.
Yeah, but yeah, there are
intern.
internships, and there are people. I always try to get try to help people out and bring people in the cutting room, even if it's just for a day or two, kind of see things and learn.
You do have a website, filmediting.com.
Yeah.
You teach. Do a lot of people email you, contact you? Is that how to get in contact with you?
I did. I actually get a bunch of people that email me. It's funny. I did this animated short, and it's called The Velvet Abstract.
Oh, yes. I was about to ask you about that.
Oh, you're okay. So that was actually from somebody who got me through my site, because I used to do a podcast, which is also there, where I interview editors and directors. And so he was a listener of the podcast, and a British guy, and he had this short he wanted to do. This was 8 years ago. And it was this animated short. He was going to have the animation done in like 16, 17 different countries, and he wanted someone to cut it together. And so I said, yeah. He came here, and I said, yeah, I'll do it for you. And then 7 years went by, and he went, are you still available? I'm like, sure. And so he literally sent me the footage on a little thumb drive, and I cut it here, and I would upload him cuts. And that show was all about transitions, because I already had the footage from everyone else, these animators, but I had to make the transitions work from one to the next. And so it was about creating transitions, finding spots where you could blend stuff. So that was really what that was about. But that was all through the website. He just found me through the website. So
you guys took that Velvet Abstract. You guys went to the Queen Palms and you guys won?
I guess I won a editing award from the Queen Palms, I guess, yeah. It's won a bunch of Best Pictures for experimental films throughout all these different festivals.
Thank you, Patrick J. Don Vito.
Absolutely, no problem.
Nice interview. Go see The Green Book. It's won 5 Oscar nominations. It also won the Golden Globe for the Best Screenplay and Best Screen Editing.